Max Verstappen these rule changes for next season. I think it might actually suit him. Will it favour someone like Lewis Hamilton? Red Bull have never done this before. Anything could happen. Hello and welcome back to the Inside Track with me, sports journalist Matt Majendie. Now this week we're looking towards 2026 and the major car regulation changes that have been described as the biggest overhaul of the sport in 50 years. So here we go. Here are the 5 things you need to know about the regulation changes for next season for 2026. So if we're talking about fundamental changes, the big thing is how these cars are powered essentially. So you've still got the 1,000 brake horsepower cars, you've got the 1.6 litre V6s. There was talk of possibly V8s, V10s, but that's not happening. It's going to be the V6s. Now, what's different is you've still got an internal combustion engine powering the car, but at the moment there's a sort of electrical power. There's these hybrid units, so the electric power powers about 20% of it. Now, what they're trying to move towards is a 50-50 split, so 50% of the power from the internal combustion engine and 50% from the electrical power. Now, that's not fully decided. There's a little bit of toing and froing about how that might be. There's pushbacks from some. Christian Horner, when he was boss of Red Bull, was keen for perhaps a little less of electric power. It's too big a step, and there was concern that drivers would be lifting and coasting down the home straight, so you wouldn't see the ultimate pace. So it looks like we're veering towards a little shift in maybe 55% internal combustion engine, 45% electrical power. That's not totally decided, so we'll see that shift and change, and conversations there are ongoing. But that's the big kind of move, really. So whenever there's big changes in Formula One, we inevitably ask, why is this going about? Why has this come to being? Now, this has been quite a long time in the offing, and there's different parts to it. One part is the greener credentials. So they're going carbon net zero 2030. So that's the aim. So you're going along that of trying to make things greener. So you're using more electrical power, burning less fuel, etc., more sustainable fuels, all of that pathways there. Then there's a simple numbers game, an interest game. And what Formula One want to do is to get as many big car manufacturers in as possible. Now, changing to this model, Honda have said they'd come back in, so they're coming back in as an engine supplier. You've got Ford partnering with Red Bull as Red Bull create their own power unit. You've got Audi coming in as a manufacturer for next season. They're currently kick sour is that how it looks, but it'll become Audi next season. And on top of that, you've got General Motors coming with Cadillac. So there's some big players in the car manufacturing business. Top of the Mercedes, the Ferraris, etc. That's a big deal for Formula One. There's also the part which they're always trying to do in Formula One. They talk about the fans and they want to have more overtaking. So these are slightly lighter, more nimble cars. We've seen and we've talked on this podcast a lot of races where we haven't had great overtaking. There hasn't been huge opportunities like that. So it's aimed at slightly shorter, slightly narrower cars, and in theory, easier to get past the car in front of you. So DRS, drag reduction system as it exists, basically your little power boost button you can use when you're within a second of a car in front of you in certain sections of a track. That's gone. Now, there's something called manual override mode, MOM. So it's a little different abbreviation, MOM. I'm sure that'll catch on in different ways. But what that means is it's a bit like the DRS in the sense that you can have this extra power boost if you're a car a second behind. But there's no what you would call predefined zones on the track. So you can be anywhere on the track and kind of hit that booster button. There's also, on top of that aspect, there's active aerodynamics. So drivers can have little flaps they can adjust on their rear wing and their front wing. There's a mode X and there's a mode Z, I believe, at different points of the race. So it's a sort of constant kind of tinkering for a driver. So it's going to be, we've talked in the past about these mad steering wheels these drivers have, and there'll be even more things to get their head around to understand. So that's the sort of, I guess, basic overlook of how that'll change. One of the big shifts for next season is going to 100% sustainable fuel. Now, I've talked about the 2030 target for net zero carbon for Formula One, and they're always pushing that message, and that's big for them. Now, the sustainable fuels, there's lots of different ways that people think is the right way to go in the direction for greener powering of cars, and the manufacturers and the teams have agreed this is their way to go. There is concern, though, about the cost. There was a report recently that said this could be as much as $300 a litre for this fuel. So it is expensive stuff. Whether that's exactly right, you sometimes say these things sort of come out in Formula One that aren't entirely true. So that is an interesting one to work out how that cost is going to be, because obviously we've got a cost cap situation. There's a certain spend, and I think there was a bit of concern among certain teams how that cost is met, whether there's something in place that's an allowance for an additional cost for fuel. People always want to know how big a change can be, and the reality is we don't know how big a change it'll be until it's all in place. There's always this. It's when you have a regulation change, it's exciting. There's this unknown. You don't really know how it's going to play out for the field, what it's going to mean exactly. But it is big. Like, it really is a big change. People are talking about the biggest change for half a century. This is quite a seismic direction the sport is going to in how these cars are going to behave, how they're powered, the fuel, etc. It is a big, big, big change. What we want to know is, well, we know all these things they're talking about the DRS going, about the sustainable fuel, about the power units, the way the electric power will be harnessed, etc. But what we don't know is how that's going to, I guess, affect the grid, the layout of the grid. Who's going to be top dog, who's going to be back of the grid, and that's the sort of excitement. And I think all the teams, I know from being within Red Bull, they're looking nervously over to see how McLaren are doing, Mercedes, Ferrari, but no one really knows. No one can dust off that crystal ball and know for sure what'll happen until race 1 of next season. It's interesting to think how this would affect Max Verstappen, these rule changes for next season. The reality is it's the same for all 20 drivers, or 22 as it'll be, because we've got Cadillac coming in as a new team. They're bringing in Checo Perez, Verstappen's old teammate, and Valtteri Bottas. So 22 drivers, it's going to affect everyone in the same way. The differences I think I see, and by being like in the engineering office, sometimes these races, hearing how much information Verstappen is able to impart, how much stuff he observes, while so much stuff is going on in the cockpit, so many twiddles of his dials and changing of settings, etc. The fact there might be even more of that, I think it might actually suit him. He's just got so much capacity to do other things. He's such an innately quick driver, natural driver, that actually I think he'll have more headspace than some. You'd think maybe a rookie that might be harder to comprehend something like this. But the other big one is the power unit. It's all about the power unit. Some have concerns that it's all reliant on how good your power unit is, and we don't know how good it is because Red Bull have never done this before. They've never built their own engine. They never built their own power unit. So it's quite exciting to see. Christian Horner said it. Laurent Mekies has said it. Other people in the team will say it. The reality is they're not going to be the best engine at the start. They just can't be. They're going against teams who've done this for years. But the reality is they're not a million miles away. General perception is Mercedes have the quickest engine at this point. But Red Bull markers seem to be that's about 0.2 of a second away. So that's not insurmountable when new regulations come into play. So you would think Max would be a little bit behind in that regard power-wise, but we've seen what he can do even when he doesn't have the quickest car. You talk about him winning. We talk about him winning the last race in Baku, which didn't seem necessarily possible going into that weekend. So we know even if he doesn't have the quickest car, and again we saw it in the 2024 season, he can still win races. Max Verstappen's future rears its head each season, and we had it in 2024, and then it went away. We had it this season, it went away when he committed his future to the team. We don't know the reality of what's going to happen. As it stands, the strict rule of it, he has a contract with Red Bull until 2028. So in theory, he's a Red Bull driver for next season and beyond that point. But there is a situation, there's a clause in his contract where he can leave if he's not at a certain position at a certain point of the season. And I'm pretty sure that he'll clear that hurdle and he'll be able to do that should he choose to do that. The team have always said if they're not going to keep someone there that doesn't want to be there. But if Red Bull come out of the box with a very competitive car or a car that's not far off from that and can be competitive, that's going to be the thing that keeps him there. If he's in a position of going for podiums, of going for wins, then he's going to be at that team. But if he sees this Mercedes power unit doing very well at Mercedes or other teams that they'll be supplying the engine to, then his glance will be looking lustfully over there to see what's possible. So that'll be an exciting one as we sort of get half a dozen races into the season, when you'll get a sense of how things are settling down, what the parameters are for that season. Because whoever's the front marker is likely to be in that position, everyone will be chasing that, so he'll look enviously perhaps to there. So expect more talk and rumours which infuriates him about his future starting before too long in 2026. This is the great joy, and I think this is why these rule shake-ups happen, because in theory, last place could go to first place to last. Anything could happen. As the cost cap comes into play, people have got similar budgets to play with. It's squeezing the field. So it's exciting that, we could see a Williams back at the front again. We've talked favourably about Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz, what they're capable of doing, and how great would it be to have a team of that history and tradition and success in the past to be back to the front again. But really, no one knows. That's what I love. We can talk endlessly all day long about what's going to happen next season. No one knows, which is fun. And I think there's so many parts. We might have people come to testing when they first test everything in, I think, Barcelona in January. Cars won't even start, or they won't make it through a lap. There'll be reliability issues, which endlessly happen. So, the quickest, person who's got the most power is great, but also the car that can be the most reliable, quickest, and get rid of gremlins will be a big factor in that. Will it favour someone like Lewis Hamilton? I just don't know. I don't know how how well Ferrari are up to speed, how well they've got a grip on it. These regulation changes can suit designers, they can suit drivers in different ways. I, I guess a lot of eyes will be on Aston Martin. We've talked about Adrian Newey in the past here, obviously the mastermind previously for Red Bull, and he was the mastermind at Williams and McLaren, and now he's in the mastermind at Aston Martin. So I'd be interested. There's another old fogey on the grid in Fernando Alonso, even older than Hamilton at 44, and he's still going on for another season. And it'd be fascinating to see what new he can come up with. He somehow seems to uncover tricks that people don't see in regulations, and if he can conjure up something for Fernando Alonso, it'd be very interesting to see what can happen there. But similarly, who knows what Ferrari might have up their sleeves for Hamilton. At the moment, Hamilton is not even the quickest driver in his team. That's Charles Leclerc. So yeah, there's a bit of work to be done there. But yeah, who knows how it plays out. I am really excited about next season because it's the start of a new set of regulations, and the field aren't bunched up. They shouldn't be bunched up because there's lots of different permutations, different ways you can tackle it. So there should be a greater extreme between first place and last place, between drivers at top teams, and genuinely fascinated to see how that plays out. I'd love to see like random different winners. It's so boring when you get the same winner every time. And it's been great, of late that we haven't had just the McLarens winning the whole time. We've had different winners, but I think next season there could be the permutation of all sorts of different race winners. That's all for this week ahead of the race in Singapore on Sunday. We're back next week when I'll be with Rick Edwards by my side again to discuss everything that happened at the Marina Bay circuit. Thanks for joining us here on the Inside Track podcast. Now remember to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, or all three if you fancy. Search for the Inside Track podcast or check out the show notes. The Inside Track is funded and made by BBC Studios, a commercial company that's wholly owned by the BBC. It's produced and edited by John Weeks. Video editing and social media is by Georgina Revel, and James Cook is the executive producer.